Franchise and Startup Summit, Retail Leadership Summit, and many more inspiring events. Thank you, Mr. Shah, for accepting our invite. Over to you.
Thank you, Shilpa, so much. And thank you, Mr. Kalwa. You made our morning more simple. मुझे लग रहा था early morning 7:30 सब सो जाएंगे, पर अभी आपका ये डरावना instruction सुन के I'm sure half of the job is done. Less people are going to sleep, because IBBI missed on that point that you can attend, but then sleeping is still allowed in the lecture. Na? You still get the CEP. So वो point को भी ध्यान रखना पड़ेगा. So I'll make sure that we don't sleep. And in case if we sleep, then I'll make sure my voice is sweet enough कि आपको नींद भी अच्छी आए. So let's try and work out on ESOP. I must admit, I might have given like more than 100, 300 hours lectures on valuation, but this is my first lecture early in the morning. So अगर because early in the morning की वजह से सिर्फ ये ऊपर का हिस्सा ही dressed up है, नीचे I'm still in night dress. तो अगर मैं कुछ goof up कर जाऊँ तो please pardon me. हम वापस discuss करके उसको write कर लेंगे. Shall we begin the lectures? Cool. Let me share the screen. Today's topic that we have is
yeah, go ahead, Niki.
Yes, I'll just share the screen.
Yeah.
Yes, I hope everybody is able to have the access to the screen. Yeah, cool. So now here, today's topic is ESOPs. And as Shilpa rightly said, that today most of the companies, wherein I see that almost 80% of the startups come to us and they tell us that, Madam, हमको ESOPs देने हैं. क्या ESOP किसको देना है? बोलता है, we want to retain employees and we have very nice CTO and common words, right? CTO पहले नहीं जानते थे, हम CFO तक रुके हुए थे just 10 years before, but now CTO is a very common word. And won't believe अभी तो कितने सारे words आ गए, CRO and CTO, CEO और CFO तो पुराने जमाने के titles हैं. The new many titles have come in. So they are wanting to retain those people, and retention ka the biggest or the very, very upcoming tool which people are using very, very creatively is ESOPs. So today what we plan to do is we've covered ESOPs. We have tried to cover in ESOP the basics of ESOPs, when to issue ESOP, who can be issued ESOPs, what are the current trends in startups where ESOPs are so creatively used, and what are the other types of share-based payments beyond ESOPs, which can be like SAR or CSOPs or RSUs and phantom stocks, sweat equity. What are the differences between all of them? And then lastly, we'll also cover upon the valuation aspects. What are the methods of valuation? Basics, we'll dwell upon the valuation. And though we are not taxation experts, but I still believe to understand the entire subject completely, because if we have to guide our clients beyond valuation, it is important that we know what is the tax implications that can come into picture when we are planning the entire ESOP structure. So we have touched based upon last 10-15 minutes, wherein my colleague will be explaining on the tax front also on the ESOP. So that's our agenda for the day. Not too many, but yes, if we go deeper, this can be a topic which we can talk and discuss the entire day as well. So we'll try and touch base upon today. Before we begin, and so that I take this entire convocation more fruitfully, what I will request Shilpa to put up is, let's understand the crowd. Let us understand how many of you have the knowledge of ESOP, and whether the basics, that is what we need to touch upon, or we directly dive deeper. Scuba diving करनी है कि surface पे थोड़ा सा खेलना है, वो हमें समझ में आए. So Shilpa, can you run that poll and let me know if people have knowledge on ESOP basic concepts?
Yeah, we can do that, but a small technical glitch. I would request everyone to. Can you see the questions?
Yes, Shilpa. So
yeah, please answer only first and second.
I would request participants to please contribute so that accordingly we can take up the entire discussion today.
I think we cannot submit until we answer all the questions.
Oh, sorry, a technical glitch, please go ahead and answer everything and then we will take up. Just try if you can. Yeah, please, I request everyone, it's a technical glitch, answer all the poll questions and then we can
I think
continue.
Shilpa, what they can do is beyond the first and second rest answers, they can just play around with any of the choices, you know.
So Shilpa, will this actually be all the poll questions for this as per IBBI regulations?
Yeah, yes.
Okay.
I request all the participants to attempt all the questions and the poll report will be generated and submitted to IBBI.
I think you can, the submit option will be enabled only after you respond. So you'll never be able to submit unless until all questions are answered. That's how the screen was designed.
Yeah. It's a technical glitch.
So you can go to sleep earlier. Huh?
I see a message in the chat box from Mr. Chandrasekhar, and he's been asking that we prefer more focus on valuation methodology. Sure, sir, we will take the valuation methodology, and I'm touching upon the Black-Scholes and the binomial model in the entire presentation. But to do that and to understand that, it's very important that we understand the basic concepts of and the basic terms that are used in ESOP. So this poll is only to understand whether you are aware of the terms, then we'll go a little faster on those lines. If not, we might go a little slower, explain the terms in depth, and then touch upon the valuations. But we'll definitely, rest assured, we'll definitely touch the valuation part. Shilpa, can we just wait for another 30 seconds and then begin?
Niki, I request to cover the procedure and the tax matters also and the employees, the difference between vesting option or the granting little.
Sure.
I hope all of you have attempted. Yeah, I'll be closing the poll now. Anyone feels that they require more time?
I think you can close, Shilpa.
Yeah, we are good.
Oh, super. So as we can see from the first two, we are saying that almost 50% of the people have handled ESOP assignments and 70% of them are aware with the terms. So what we'll do is just that we brush up again on the terms. We'll quickly run through the entire terms and all the conditions and then move on specifically on the valuation methodologies. We can dive deeper and take up all the questions that are there regarding to the methods.
You want to see the answers of the other poll questions, Niki?
I think that's okay. We can do it later on. Yeah. Okay. So now, first of all, let's, as the name suggests, employee stock option pool. So it's very important to understand each of it. It is applicable to employees and yes, a little bit beyond employees too. So that will come to know whom it is applicable to, who can be under the ESOP schemes. Stocks, obviously for shares, and then options. So let's understand what is options. So basically this is as simple as the normal options that we take into. It is a derivative instrument that are instruments that are used derivative instruments are the instruments that derive their value from some underlying instrument. Same is the case with ESOPs. In ESOPs also their value is derived from an underlying, which is nothing but the share stock. So an option has a right, wherein it is a right but not an obligation, which is given to the buyer that they can buy a particular asset at a particular specified price within the timeline. That is usually the option, and the same applies to the ESOPs as well. So it is nothing but in case of ESOP, it is the right which is given to the ESOP holder or the employee that they can subscribe to a particular equity share at a particular price which has already been predetermined within a timeline that is defined and within the terms which is coming under the ESOP scheme. Now, what are the categories of options which are applicable here also, which is a call option and a put option? Usually ESOP is a call option. There are different types of exercisability. One is an American option and an European option. Abhi American option, obviously America bolta hai mere ko jab jo karna hai main karunga. Same is what happens with ESOPs, wherein it happens that there is no end date or a specified date on which you have to exercise. It is the right which the ESOP holder has that they can exercise at any point of time. So that is the American option. European option, Europe वाले बोलते हैं भाई हम conditions में जीते हैं, आप बताओ. Then you specify a date. That is the date on which the option needs to be exercised. So that is the European option. Both are working today. So now if we go to the what is the in the money or at the money or out of the money option, same happens with the ESOPs. You will see that a lot of startups are issuing ESOPs. But agar jab tak the underlying asset, which is the shares, uske price बढ़ते नहीं है, vis-a-vis what they have committed to pay in the ESOP scheme, the option does not hold any good, does not have value, which is where we call it as out of the money. Say for example, ESOP के लिए मैंने आज yesterday only we did one ESOP valuation wherein in the scheme they had determined कि current हमारा जो share price है, वो share price the employee has to pay as per the scheme. So that was the strike price for them, which was 280 rupees per share. And now if the company say is raising funds in the next round and over the years, say after 2 years, the company ki price goes below, the valuation goes below the current price, then in that sense, there is no sense for that employee to exercise the ESOP scheme and apply for the shares because they don't hold any good. They will have to pay more value than what the shares would be worth at that point in time. So those are called as out of the money option. And obviously the opposite is in the money when there is a benefit that is going to be there to the holder. That is where they will be exercising the ESOP scheme or the ESOP options.
Niki, just 1 minute.
Sure.
Sorry. So in your experience, you have observed that, not in every case face value or just around the face value the startups are issuing?
Oh, no,
It
no,
can
yes,
be any-
absolutely. It is a lot more creative. Not necessarily it is face value. It can be face value and it can be a price beyond face value also. Because as I told you yesterday only we did it, wherein it was 278 and which was their current valuation price is what they had come up with. Sorry, it wasn't current. It was they raised currently funds. So that was the value they determined that at this value, we want to issue it to the ESOPs. And they were planning to raise the next fund. Since it was a DIPP recognized startup, they were not bothered about how their valuation is changing within 2 months or a month or so. And hence they were expecting a higher value for the fundraise, which is where the valuation was not same. And hence the price was also not same. Yeah. Okay. So then what happens is, what are the different categories as we just discussed? It is the call option. Generally, it is the American option, but with conditions. And it is also in the money option wherein ESOP would be used or would be actually exercised. Now, let's touch base upon the key terms of ESOPs, as most of you are aware about it. But before we delve deeper into the valuation methodology and understand it more, we need to refresh ourselves early in the morning about the ESOP terms. So first of all, ESOP scheme. ESOP scheme is a document which is prepared by the company wherein all the data and the terms relating to the option which they are being given to the employees are covered in here. Now, the ESOP scheme is the primary document which we as valuers need to collect from the companies. If the ESOP scheme is not being granted at this point of time when we are doing the valuation, a draft ESOP scheme is also fair. But that ESOP scheme is one of the major documents that we should have with us. Second is the grant letters. Again, this is the second document which we should keep it with us as our documentation when we are doing the ESOP assignment. So grant letters are the documents which are being given to the employees to whom the option is granted. Third comes the vesting period. Again, here minimum vesting period as per law is 1 year, but there can be a variety of vesting period wherein the employees are granted ESOPs. Fourth is the strike price. This is the price at which the employee will get the ESOPs. So this can be a price which is as low as 1 rupee face value, 1 rupee in cases when there is face value is 1 rupee, and cases wherein it can be above also, the example we just saw. Then the exercise date. The exercise date is the date on which the ESOPs will be can be exercised. The grant date is the date on which now exercise date and grant date are very, very important to be understood, because those are the two primary input figures which we need to use when we are doing our valuations. So exercise date is the date on which the exercise can happen, and grant date is the date on which the letters of the grant are given to the employees. Now let's check up one thing, whether the audiences are awake or I have made them off to sleep. So can you somebody just tell me whether the grant date and the exercise date, the gap between the two can be 6 months? I think people can unmute and answer, Shilpa, right?
12
Yes.
months.
Yes.
1 year minimum is the company
Minimum
has
1 year.
done.
Wow, superb. Let's applaud. We are awake. Yes, true. Since minimum 1 year is the gap which is required, the vesting period timeline, hence the date of grant and the exercise date cannot be 6 months or so. Minimum has to be 1 year and beyond. Then let's come to the exercise period. Exercise period, the entire period can be as per your creativity, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, it all depends. But the entire period within which the exercise can happen, the ESOPs can be exercised, is called the exercise period. Then comes the graded vesting, again very creative. What happens is people, the companies don't want to give away the startups in the first go and the entire amount at one tranche. So what they say is that we want to give up the give the ESOPs in a graded manner. Grading is there in terms of the time period, grading is terms of how much to be issued, grading is terms of whom to be issued. So different category of people. So all that three comes under the purview of better understanding under the graded section. Then it is time to expiration. The period from which we begin the grant date till the last date, till the time wherein they can exercise the ESOP, that entire period is called as the time to expiration. Say for example, somebody has issued an ESOP in 2022 and they have a time period till 2027, within which whenever it is beneficial to the employees, they can exercise the ESOPs after they have vested. Then that entire time period is called as time to expiration. Then comes up the spot price. So can somebody tell me what is the spot price?
Current price.
Current market price.
Price of the underlying.
Perfect. Perfect. Absolutely correct. The spot price is the current market price of that stock. And it is important and required to do this because it will help us understand, again, a very, very input figure, a very critical and important input figure in the entire calculation. But at the same time, it is very easy to arrive at this figure depending upon you are doing this for a listed company or an unlisted company. And the last and the important point is the vesting conditions. As I told you that people have become very, very creative in putting up the vesting conditions also. There can be a variety of vesting conditions. One can be how the company will perform, you know. Depending on that, the shares get vested. I mean, sorry, the ESOPs get vested. Second can be on how the employee is performing and for what time period he has been with the company. So variety of vesting conditions have been put upon in the entire ESOP scheme. So those are the vesting conditions. Now we've understood the basic terms of ESOP. So let's understand that when an ESOP is granted and who are the ones who are right now taking the maximum benefit and advantage of ESOPs. So yes, earlier a lot of listed companies and bigger companies were using ESOPs as a tool to give benefits or retain their employees. But today we are seeing a lot of startups. So if I go by the proportion, what I have seen is more, rather I would say the proportion is almost imbalanced. Now today more startups, smaller companies are also using the ESOP as a tool to retain their employees, gain more talent compared to the larger companies. So what is the stage? So usually we see that pre-seed stage. Now in the startup entire life cycle, Usually they are being considered based on the funding that they do it, and they have various stages like pre-seed, seed, early VC, late VC, growth stage. These are all the different stages wherein a startup's life cycle is covered. So what happens is, wherein it's a pre-seed, usually the funding is done from friends, family, angel investors, and that is also a stage wherein the company wants to retain and have more employees and talent under their purview. But usually we don't see that a pre-seed stage. It's a very small organization. At times it's not even getting a very good revenue. It's at a MVP stage or an early traction stage, which is where not necessary that ESOP scheme is granted or drafted. But yes, definitely when you are close to a seed round, you will see that angels or VC will not allow you to get the funding till you have kept a portion for the ESOPs. According to my experience, what I have seen is usually 5 to 7% is the fair number which people keep for the ESOP pool. In fact, now what they've started is, this was a new one, and I would request people to pull in their views and their experiences on the scheme, because there are a lot of people who have already done valuation engagement. So we came across one of the companies who was a company wherein one of the renowned cricketer had also put in their money, and the clients. We got the clients via the CFO of that organization, and he's coming and telling me, Niki madam, इसमें तो ये cricketer ने पैसा डाला हुआ है, तो हमको आपका valuation चाहिए. Very good, let's do it, and get it of 5%. Am I audible and clear?
Your voice is breaking.
Yeah, I just got a message that my internet was unstable. Give me a second. I will just look into it.
Yeah.
I hope we shouldn't have that problem now. So as we were discussing, so he came to me and he said that, madam, we have...
The audio is still not clear.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. You're clear now. Yeah.
Thank you so much. So the question that came to me was, they said that, ma'am, we have created an ESOP pool. Okay, there was no ESOP scheme that was drafted at this stage. They had come for before the ESOP pool, they wanted to know what is my equity valuation, what is the equity valuation of their company, which is why they had come for the initial phase and then ESOP. But when we are doing the ESOP equity valuation, obviously we have to take the number of shares, which becomes our denominator, correct? And the question that came up was that the client had only created the ESOP pool, not granted even one ESOP to anybody, not drafted the scheme, nothing was on record. They did not use the trust route because it's a small startup at that point in time. They did not use the trust route. They only had passed the board resolution, created an ESOP pool. Now my question is, when we do our equity valuation and we have to calculate the number of shares, should we consider this ESOP pool, as it will be a part of your cap table, the capital structure, the capital table? Should we consider this ESOP pool in the number of shares or not? I know we are not using the poll, but you can either put your answers in the chat box or unmute can answer. A lot of people saying no, yes. Abhi to 50-50 hai. 2 no's, 2 yes. Or is yes, because the promoters would have accepted for the dilution. No, yes. Please confirm if a company already given is now want to give for the result. Okay, so we are having a mixed opinion here, yes and no. Or maybe bhi halat same hi hui thi, mixed opinion, because cap table, capital structure, that they are giving us signed, because we make sure that whenever we have our documentation in place, we take the capital structure signed from the management. because a lot of time it happens is they give us the cap structure which is different from what is reflected on the MCA portal. So for our safety, we suggest that capital structure be management se certify karke le lo कि as on the valuation date this was their capital structure. So which is what they were ready to give us signed wala कि yes this is our cap structure. But at the same time, if we think deeper, तो हमें लगेगा यार ये तो उनका tool हो गया to play around with their pricing, because आज ESOP pool एक create किया, took on valuation. Tomorrow they want to go ahead and change that number to anything else because कोई share issue हुए नहीं है. Nobody stops them to do it. It gets changed. Again, the share price can change. So it can act as a, you know, a lollipop or a game or a tool for them to play around. So that was my concern when I didn't wanted to consider. So I had both yes and no's, as we can see in the chat box today. I also had both the views and both reasons sounded valid to me. Though in that case, what we did was we took the ESOP pool into consideration because as on the date of the valuation, we had the board resolution in place wherein the management was saying that they have issued an ESOP pool. At the same time, we took the cap table, signed cap table for our safety. That see by management is saying we have it as on the valuation date, which is what I as a valuer is accepting that data, and I am not an auditor to the firm, or I am not a forensic auditor who will think that kal uth ke change ho sakta hai to kya. So that was not my job, and hence we did take it. At the same time, when I'm saying that we took it, I prefer that usually when we do it, we try that agar wo ESOP pool mein se grant hua hai, then it is a safer option for us to consider it.
Ma'am, I have a question here.
Yeah, please, you can be a little louder.
Ma'am, the thing is, when the ESOP pool has been created, we know that the ESOP pool has been created. So the shares can be allotted, the shares can be transferred to this pool by way of transfer from the promoters as well, right? Without the number of shares getting increased.
I am very sorry. I couldn't hear your question very clearly, but I understood something that your question was relating to transfer of shares from the pool. So let me
Transfer of shares into the pool. The promoters will transfer their shares into the pool. That's how the pool is created. In which case, although there is a pool which has been created, it will not lead to any increase in the number of shares. So that being the case, that uncertainty being there, would it be a good idea for us to consider the additional shares emanating from the pool?
So Uttam, here the interesting thing is that when a startup is not using the trust route and they are creating the pool, at that point in time, there is no shares that are actually issued. There is no shares that are actually coming into existence. It only comes on the cap table. That is the most interesting thing, that when we say that the company has 1,000 shares, okay, there 1,000 shares exist. You will have a share certificate. You will have that 1,000 shares ka kuch existence hai. But when we come to a pool which is created in the startup, and the case that I was talking about, कि उन्होंने 5% का pool create किया, which is say 50 shares, that 50 shares have not come into existence today. They are not issued anywhere. They are not allotted anywhere. They don't exist today. It is only that on the cap table, only in the capital table, the number of shares have gone up from 1,000 to 1,050, and the company is committing themselves via the board resolution that this 50 shares we will be allotting as ESOPs. So had it been the case that you are mentioning, yes, it would have been very, very easier for us to accept that and include it. But in the case that I was discussing, the shares have not come into existence only. So aaj to hawa ki baat hai, because it is only via a board resolution and nothing else that is coming up. And this is happening today.
Yes, thank you, madam. That was clear. Thanks a lot.
Yeah. So we just discussed on when ESOP, as I said, that maybe in the early stage wherein you are, the fans and family round, ESOP is not required. Still, there are a lot of companies जो company खोलते हैं startups and next day बोलते हैं हमको ESOP देना है. So ESOP pool तो ready करके ही रखना है, because today the people who are going in the funding round, they are aware that the first question the VC and the angels ask them is, have you created your ESOP pool? And hence most of the people have now become more aware. Founders have become more aware that they need to create an ESOP pool. But as I told you, there are different ways in which they are solving this problem of creating the ESOP pool. Pre-seed stage and seed stage, not compulsory. But as soon as a VC enters, he will not enter unless an ESOP pool is created. Obviously, early VC और उसके बाद वालों को तो ESOP चाहिए ही चाहिए.
Niki, I think you have not answered that whether we need to include the ESOP pool or not when you are calculating number of shares.
Sorry, can you just repeat your question?
Yeah, the ESOP pool we need to take into consideration or not when you are calculating number of shares.
So as I said, I'll repeat here that in that case, we considered it, we included it in the calculation. Reason being that for our safety, we took the management certified capital table saying that yes, as on that date, it is a part of their capital structure. We also took the certified copy of the board resolution, which said that as on that date, they have created the ESOP pool, and we considered it. My thought process behind that was that we are not the auditors to see that whether tomorrow they will issue it or change it, because as on the valuation date, the management is certifying and giving me that this ESOP pool exists, which was the reason for me to include it in the valuation at that point of time. So to give you an answer, there is no simple yes and no. We have to see the facts of that case. If the client would not have given me the certified cap table, I would not have included it. Does that answer?
Yeah, got it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Just to add here, the same situations are faced in our case also. But like you said, this is a point of factor which can manipulate the things. So a simple example, I was also talking to the client. I said there's a difference between authorized capital and paid up capital. Paid up capital is what is in existence. Authorized capital is not in existence today. That does not mean you come and take the denominator as authorized capital. So this is also equal to that. You consider ESOP. This is a practical challenge, but then the angel investors and VC lobby for them to include the ESOP pool. And this is just a pure domination on the valuers to take this into consideration when it is logically not correct. And mere MRL, everything and anything can come in the MRL. That does not mean we do something which is not correct.
I agree, Kaushik. I agree to your point, and which is why I also said that both the views were delving upon my mind also. कि यार no के लिए भी मेरे पास reasons है और yes के लिए भी. But there was a difference. Why I took that decision is, see, MRL is one thing, but it also was having the board resolution wherein they said that they have created the ESOP pool. Now, board resolution is not MRL which they are giving it to us. It is on record document which they created, which is also a base which we took that, okay, board resolution hai, which is where they are saying that they have already issued. And at the same time, they are giving to us in the MR also that, yes, we are including it at the date, on the date of the valuation, which is where we found it as a fair thing to include it. But yes, you can choose to have something else also saying that, no, we don't want to include it. Both the views are possible. We just have to go by the feeling we are comfortable with.
Just to hold on to ask, when you say ESOP pool, you are essentially saying that this is the quantum of equity shares that you are setting it aside in order to give it later to any person whom do you want, right?
Yes.
So if they don't give it anything, it will also get lapsed, right? It may lapse also, because that is at the whims and whims at the discretion of the management, right? So
absolutely.
to that extent, therefore, even if it's written in the board resolution that the cap table is there, until it is issued, it is not issued.
Perfect, Ganesh ji, absolutely right. In fact, मैं तो बोलूँ lapse का उस time पे वो question नहीं था. Reason being, there is no scheme that was drafted. तो lapse आ ही नहीं रहा था. उन्होंने सिर्फ इतना board resolution pass किया था कि 5% हम ESOP रखेंगे. तो कब तक रखेंगे we don't know. In fact, why wait for lapse? It is a board resolution. It is an internal document when it comes to a private limited company. Tomorrow they can also change the board resolution. That, okay, now I don't want to issue so much 5%. We are restricting it 2%. It's a board decision, so nobody stops them. That is also immediately possible. In fact, they could have done that the next day also. So yes, that is a possibility, and hence a very, very controversial point that what is right, because both the ways we have arguments and very, very valid arguments.
Do we also have to check for the presence of authorized capital allowing for creation of the ESOP pool? If, as on the date the resolution is passed, the gap between issued and authorized capital might not be sufficient to cover for the number of shares that these guys are saying they'll create an ESOP pool.
I think that's a primary thing, and mostly मैंने ऐसे देखा है that all of these companies have company secretaries in-house or consultants, और उतना वो जो minute ये जो आप बोल रहे हो, that is usually taken care by the company secretaries, that they don't allow them to do this ESOP pool wala thing unless they have raised the authorized capital. So practically I have seen that people are able to do it unless ignorance में वो miss हो गया कि अरे authorized capital ही नहीं और pool खड़ा कर दिया. Rarely I have seen that happen, but yes, I think it's a primary check कि भाई authorized तो बड़ा हुआ होना ही चाहिए to make sure that you are able to issue your ESOP pool.
Now, one point on that, we have come across a similar situation, and when we were doing advisory, we said that okay, anyway, at the time of issuance is that you need to have an authorized capital, so you can actually postpone the increase in authorized. They didn't want to do it immediately, so we actually give them, because we were on the advisory side, right? We were not checking them, so we have little more benefit in trying to accommodate them. So we actually told them that, but yes, we have actually come across that situation, I think.
So
yeah, at times companies can think that there's a procedural thing. In any case, we have 1 year time. We intend to do it to follow the procedures till the time. But for now, this might happen when they might have hired somebody in an urgency and they had to do all of these things, and they might regard the other things as mere procedural thing. वो तो कर ही लेंगे आगे जाके.
So ऐसा है मैथिली and sir कि startups को तो कोई खर्चा अभी करना ही नहीं होता है, तो they तो want everything कि भाई ये तो बाद में हो सकता है, तो ये अभी नहीं चाहिए. So yes, they will ask for everything, and that is why we are saying so many variety also. We'll discuss, there is so many variety and versions of ESOP that have come up कि हमको लगता है यार इतना क्रिएटिव लोग कहाँ से हो गए ये फील्ड में. So yes, now 1 year's time is there, absolutely correct. Now it will all depend upon the valuer they go to, because there is nothing mentioned in the law, valuers act, कहीं पे भी नहीं लिखा है, no guidance on what should be done in this case, because पता नहीं था ना कि लोग इतने अच्छे रास्ते निकालेंगे. So hopefully over the time we will come to know what perfect conditions need to be followed here.
So we are talking about ESOP pool, right, which is not yet granted as such. So there is no expiry period as such saying it is only valid for 1 year or so. I mean, there is no question of lapsing unless it is actually granted.
Yes, Sindhu, absolutely. Right. Yes.
Ma'am, in my one case, I have seen the audited balance sheet of 22. There is the same number of share capital, but the share which have increased for the granting, it is not reflected in the books of account. For equity version, then I can take the simple balance sheet figure. What is the reflecting number of shares?
Yes, I think then in that case it is safer because you are referring to an audited balance sheet. So I think that should be the best thing to do.
I request members, okay, to ask questions later, or otherwise we will conduct one more session on the questions. Maybe we can continue this session, okay?
I fully agree. Actually, what you have planned that you run through first, madam. Otherwise, the time is very limited.
Sure, sir.
Here I would like to add one point. Niki and I was planning a consecutive session on a particular, binomial or Black-Scholes. Actually, I'm not getting it right now. She'll tell. So in the end, I will be asking all of you whether you want separate special, session. Niki will announce. Okay, there will be a follow-on session for that specific model valuation. Correct, no, Niki?
Sure, Shilpa.
Yeah, that will be a last question which we'll be asking, and that follow-on session can be requested from the speaker. If all of us agree. Okay.
Fine. Shall we just move ahead? Okay, so now here comes the question of how the startups are communicating and granting the ESOPs. So one can be as a percentage and other can be converted into value terms. It is though the percentage, but for communication purposes, it is converted into the terms of numbers, because what happens at a very, very early stage, if you say that, okay, I'm giving you 0.5% of my company, बोलेंगे आपकी company की आज value कुछ नहीं है, उसका 0.5% क्या आएगा? So it is always better to communicate in the way in which it is converted into the value that, okay, this is the value of my shares, or it would be, and hence 0.5% would give you a worth which is say 20 lakhs or 25 lakhs. It becomes more communicable. These are the people who are given valuation, ESOPs, the co-founder, the technical team, the CTO, the senior level people, the VPs and all. And usually this is no thumb rule, but just based on our experience, what we have seen, what based on their salary, what is the figures of value ESOPs that they are given. Obviously, what runs across is higher salary, you get a lesser ESOP. The more you are able to, or you are okay to sacrifice in the cash terms today, the higher ESOPs are given to you. These are the companies which we know today have issued ESOPs. You know, Infosys are there, a lot of startups are there, and many other companies doing ESOPs. We will go further now on understanding what are the different routes for issue of ESOP. Obviously, one we said wherein it's a direct route, the ESOP pool is created, and then as in when the scheme is granted, the employees get the ESOP scheme based ESOPs granted based on the scheme, and as and when they become due, they are exercising the rights, and the company will issue the ESOPs. The other route is the trust route, wherein you will have the company, you have a trust, and then the employees, wherein the trust, the shares are actually transferred to the trust, and then the trust, via the trust, it is issued to the employees. Now the important question, and this is the question which again keeps on coming up day in and day out and almost very regularly, is who all the ESOPs can be given. Because people want to give ESOPs to the directors also, and to independent directors, and to a lot of consultants. People come to us also, madam, aapko ESOP dete, hamara regular valuation aane wala hai. So that also is the question that is coming up all the time. So let's understand who all are eligible for ESOP as per the law, as per the Indian Companies Act. So all the permanent employees and directors in India or outside of subsidiary and holding company, they are eligible for ESOPs. Who are not eligible for ESOP is one is independent directors, any employee who belong to the promoter groups, and any director. Now this is a very nice condition. Any director who is holding directly or indirectly more than 10%, they are not allowed to have ESOP scheme if 5 years have completed to their company. If before 5 years, any directors who is holding more than 10 or less are allowed to have ESOPs. But if the director is holding more than 10% and the company has completed, or the startup has completed 5 years, then in that case, they are not eligible for the ESOPs. This is a situation which we have seen, that I have scored a great job because now I've got ESOP of the company. But if it's a private limited company and they are not able to go further, raise their funds, or and their shares are in demand and people are ready to waiting to buy those shares, either a VC or anybody else, then in that stage, they are always waiting and waiting to sell their stocks, and the value is never realized. So now this is the another hot topic. Let's see if you want to discuss it, we will, or we will go further into the methods today. But I want people to know today this is one of the methods which are used, which is called as the community stock option pool, very widely called as ESOPs. So what is happening today is people are raising funds, saying that, okay, we are a part of your community. Like for example, if like Byju's has a community of parents, teachers, students. They will, instead of going and raising funds from the VCs, they will say, I will go to my community and raise funds. So they'll go to your community of teachers or parents and tell them, hey, I'm looking for funding. Would you be interested in investing in me? Then in that case, I am ready to give you ESOPs, which is, I am asking you, you invest 5,000, 10,000 or 50,000 into my company. And then later on, as I grow on some trigger point or on some event happening, I will be issuing you the shares of my company, or I will be paying you cash dependent upon the value of the shares as on that point of time. And the ESOPs are happening. The very, very tricky part here is this ESOPs does not come on the cap table. It has a mandatory call option. It does not give you any voting rights. GST becomes applicable to it. There is a lot of gray area on the ESOPs today as to whether it is valid as per law, whether it is covered under what sections. But yes, I can name the companies that are currently raised funds using the ESOP routes. This is the most.
Under which section is it permitted?
Shilpa, I liked the anxiety in your voice. अरे ये कैसे हो रहा है? ये कौन से section से हो रहा है? So there is no section. This is not even covered. What they've done is very nicely. They have drafted the ESOP ka pura instrument in such a way that it is coming out of the purview of ESOPs. It is coming out of the purview of Companies Act. It is governed by the Securities Contract Act. It is said that it is only between a contract between the two parties, and that is how you will do it. It is right now not even covered under deposits. That is
how
why
different
I said
it is from crowdfunding.
Yeah, it is similar to crowdfunding, and crowdfunding is not legal in India, but this is very popularly happening. And right now we are not seeing any any legal action being taken, because the companies who are raising funds via the ESOP route, they say that they are covered via the Contract Act, and they have a contract between the investor and the company, which is where they agreed based on the terms, and they are issuing it.
Will it not be covered under issue of shares for purchase of goods or services for non-cash considerations?
Cash is coming, no?
Sorry?
We are getting cash, right?
Yes,
so
they are
it's
getting
not
cash.
No, it could be for return of services, right? Supposing if a Byju's is there and they're asking the community of teachers, so the teachers, what they would do is they'd come and teach on the platform and in return get shares issued for that.
So,
right?
sir, that is happening, and that is so still cool and good enough, because that is called as teacher stock option plan. We have covered that later on also. That is also coming.
And how is this? How is it subject to GST? Because in under GST laws there should be a supply and there should be a valuation.
Yes, sir, ma'am, it is subject to GST. If the person is investing, say 10,000 rupees, then वो 10,000 में से पहले 18% GST निकल जाता है. This amount comes into the company का.
What is, there should be two parties. There should be somebody should have actually supplied goods or services, and then there should be a consideration. Here there is a consideration that is being given, but what is the supply part of it? And what is the value of that supply?
Yes, what I can do. So I am not advocating that what they are doing is good. What I'm sharing across today to you people is that this is happening in the market today. This is a route which is being done, which is being followed, which is being accepted, and there is no legal questions. As of now, we know that they are being raised. I will share across, maybe towards the end of the PPT, if time permits, I will share across based on what guidelines the companies are using it and what treatment they are giving it in the books of accounts today. This is a much deeper topic and a completely debatable one, because it is not governed by any acts right now. Yes, if somebody is able to throw some light on how we can challenge this, because I believe this is something which is very risky too, because ESOP में कोई valuation नहीं लग रहा है. सबसे सिंपल है, कैप टेबल में नहीं आता है, पैसा लेके भाग जाओ, कोई पकड़ने भी नहीं वाला है. So people, I am seeing today many companies are moving towards this, trying to take the advantage of it, क्योंकि आज कुछ नहीं impact हो रही है, but that can definitely imbalance the society today and the working style and give one more hit to the startup bubble, seeing it whether it will burst because of this or not. But I prefer that we go on this route a little later. We've covered here.
Niki, just one that, which companies have given it or opted for it, if you can share.
I will share the link. Yeah. This we're just trying to understand on the ESOP and SAR differences, but we can do that a little later, because I believe let's focus on the valuation part. So now the primary question which all of us are interested, because वहाँ से अपना जेब भरेगा, is on when the ESOP valuations are required. So the first and the foremost thing, whenever a company thinks of issuing a ESOP, that is the first stage wherein the valuation will be required. That is not required mandatory as per law, but any of the managements, because when the ESOPs are issued, there will be hit to their P&L. Most of the times we have seen that management wants to know that how much hit it is going to be, how much it is going to be hitting my PNL and mera profit kam dikhne wala hai. So before they actually issue the ESOP scheme, they want to have a tentative understanding on what numbers it is going to be. So that is at the time of management evaluation, working is required. If we look at from the law perspective, generally it is required at the time of grant. ESOP valuation is required, and at the time of reporting date in case of cash settled options as per NDS. Valuation is required in case of income tax. It is required by merchant banker when it is at the time of exercise to understand whether it is going to be at what value it has to be taxed. Now here, let me give you one question. You've seen something on the screen.
Ma'am, may I? You had mentioned merchant banker out there. Are the RVs not entitled to do that?
Sir, what happens is RV are somebody who are recognized by Companies Act. So whenever Companies Act is asking for any valuation, RVs are required. When I spoke, I said that income tax wants to know what will be the perquisite value. So in RVs are not मतलब income tax वालों को हम अभी तक इतने ज़्यादा पसंद नहीं आए हैं. वो अभी भी merchant bankers को ही अपना favorite मानते हैं. So income tax is the case, and hence merchant bankers are the ones who are required to give the valuation reports. RVs का नहीं चलता है वहाँ.
It is specifically mentioned in section 17 subsection 2. In case of ESOPs or sweat equity or any other perquisites involving shares, only merchant banker can give. Even CS are not allowed.
Correct. Income tax में merchant bankers ज़्यादा prefer करते हैं. So,
but that is at the time of exercise, right?
Yes, at the time of exercise.
Maybe this merchant banker has to use the DCF method or NAV method in the calculation.
The method is not specified, and it is only spoken that the report from the merchant banker. So it is upon the merchant banker to decide which method to be used.
See, I think they use DCF only because they are calculating the share valuation, not option valuation.
Correct.
So, in our case, in 2 client cases, we have taken NAV method and submitted to income tax.
That should also be fine.
Subhara, I'll tell you, always income tax, they go on the crystallized value. So when they exercise, I think already that the price, what is NAV method is most appropriate. Normally, even if you go for a forex transaction, anything, when they say what is the value realized or booked, the notional value they don't consider for tax purpose. I think that okay.
Fair enough. So here we come up to the valuation of ESOPs. Now the valuation of ESOPs are much different than the valuation of equity shares. Whenever we do the valuation of equity shares, obviously we go to our favorite methods, which is NAV and DCF, which we just discussed. But when it comes to ESOPs, it is not the NAV or the DCF methods that can be used. It is the 3 different methods which are to be used when the valuation of ESOP is to be done. One is the Black-Scholes method, the other is the binomial, and third is Monte Carlo. So very, very widely used method is the Black-Scholes method. Obviously, we also use binomial depending upon the case, and Monte Carlo very rarely used for ESOPs. At times we have seen people using it for cross verification purposes, but otherwise very, very rarely used as a quad. When to use the methods? Yes, when it comes that the company has having a standard growth rate, Black-Scholes model can be used. But if we are valuing a company which has a very, very cyclical growth or which has a high growth, wherein we are speaking of startups, and I'm repeatedly using the word startups here is because today we are saying that a lot of assignments that you get are coming from startups for the ESOP valuation, in which case we can see that at times they have a very high growth projections. Then binomial might be required to be used in such cases. And Monte Carlo is used either in the actual valuations or maybe, for cross verification purposes. Now let's understand what is the difference between the Black-Scholes and the binomial before we dive deeper into how to actually do the valuations for both. So the Black-Scholes model, this is an option. The option is a European style option, which can be exercised only at the end. So in the Black-Scholes, the assumption is that it will be exercised only at the end of the period. And the model assumes the log normal property of the stock prices, which is only one value, which means is that they are expecting that the prices will move in only with 1%, the prices will change. and there are no dividend. Earlier, when the Black-Scholes came into picture, earlier there was no dividend, as an input which was factored into the model. But now the dividend has been a part of the Black-Scholes model. Whereas if we go in the binomial model, we have two possibilities, that the share price can go up or down, which is more practical option and which is included in the calculation of the ESOPs. Now involves the creation of various nodes at different type intervals, and at each time interval we'll have different share price being expected. We will go deeper into understanding of what are the nodes, but this is just for basic understanding. This is a topic which is very important, which sir also mentioned in the morning, that what all information we need to collect to when we are doing the ESOP valuation. One is, as I said, we need to have the stock option plan. We need to have that agreement in place. We need to have the grant letters if they have been issuing. We had a case wherein the company had already issued out of the entire scheme, a portion of the scheme was already granted, and a lot of them were also exercised. So then exercise letters also should be taken on record. If any of the employees have left, then in that case termination letter should be taken, details of the shares issued, the ESOP register. If there is any previous report, we need to take it. The financial statements should be taken into record. The board minutes should be in place. So this is a very, very wide list. ये सारे documents आपके पास है, IBBI को आने दो, Companies Act को आने दो, जिसको भी आने दो. We have all the information in place to make sure that our assignment is well within the purview of the law. What are the important points that needs to be covered under the report that we are issuing? One is obviously the most important thing, the valuation date needs to be mentioned in the report. The report date should be mentioned, which model we are using, the BSM, the Black-Scholes or the binomial, why we are using the model, valuation standard we are following, the framework, the assumptions, the specific input figures that we are using, and what is the source of this input figures. These are the few parameters which are very, very important, need to be covered under the ESOP valuation report. Now we are going deeper into the core parts of what are the key inputs to the ESOP valuation. Shilpa, we are continuing the session, not having any break, right?
No break.
Okay, so we'll continue, right?
Yeah.
Done. So now, what are the input figures? And these are the common input figures for both the models, be it the Black-Scholes or the binomial. So first, the foremost thing is fair value of the underlying equity share. So now, say for example, we are doing the valuation of a listed entity. How we will take the share price?
Market price.
Perfect, Sanjay. So as on the valuation date, whatever is the market price of the shares is what we will consider under the share price method, the spot price. Now, the second question that comes up is that if you are doing the valuation of a ESOP, which is being issued by an unlisted entity or a private company, in which case, what will be the share price that we will take? Any thoughts?
We need to do a valuation.
Evaluation.
Correct. So first, what we will have to do is, using our lovely NAV and DCF methodologies, we will have to first do the equity share valuation of that company, and then that number will be used as an input figure when we are doing our ESOP valuation, either using the Black-Scholes or binomial. But वो करने से पहले एक step पहले we'll have to do the entire valuation of the equity shares. The second comes up is the expected dividend on the shares. So here, very important to know, it is not the past dividend that the company has issued, but the expected dividend that the management is expecting to issue. The dividends. Then it comes the risk-free rate, exercise price, expected option life, and the volatility in the value of shares. We will go deeper into each of this, each of the terms.
In case of fair valuation of equity shares, do you suggest taking dilutive equity share value or allocated equity value to instruments?
You mean before the ESOP pool, the number of shares, what number of shares should be considered? Is that a question?
No, fair valuation of equity. Do we take per share value, dilutive share value, or we actually allocate the equity to instruments and then derive the equity share value?
Which is one of the inputs, no, Nikki, in your just 1 minute back you were saying.
So I understood on the front that
Madam, I'll explain that question. Now we
please.
are going for ESOP valuation. That question is like related to EPS, basic EPS, diluted EPS kind of situation. Now that question is, when we are going for fair valuation of equity shares, shall we do fair value as an date with outstanding shares, or shall we consider ESOP like whatever granted, that shall we consider as shares allotted and do diluted?
No. I was saying we will have preference shares. We will have liquidation preference for preference shares. So if there are different instruments available in the cap table, do we actually use the equity allocation method and derive equity share price after adjusting the liquidation preferences of preference shares? Or we directly, take the dilutive share price, considering all the shares, all the kinds of instruments as the dilutive shares.
Perfect. I will reiterate your question and let's see what is the views of the audience here. So in fact, we did one valuation of a company. It was a normal equity valuation, but that company had itna bada, matlab, almost 8 to 10 lines of different equity instruments, equity linked instruments like CCPS, compulsory convertible preference shares. Then they had CCPS series A, then they had CCD series A, and then they had series B, series C. So कम से कम 8 से 10 line थी, wherein they had the equity CCPS and all those stuff as a part of their cap table. Now the question is, when very right question the madam has put up is that if we look only equity shares, तो हो सकता है सिर्फ 100 हो. But when we look at all of this, CCPS, CCD, then a series of CCPS and CCD, there can be many more. So what is the number of shares that we should consider? Should we consider the only equity shares ka number 100, or we use this, we find their conversion ratios? So yes, CCPS is going to get converted into how many number of equity shares, and then that number of equity shares, the diluted or the converted number of equity shares, get added to the paid up capital of equity shares, and the whole sum becomes the diluted number of equity shares, and the same are being used when we do the calculation of per share value. Have I understood your question correctly, madam, now?
Yeah, I mean dilutive shares or CCPS are also shares only. I mean dilutive equity shares only, but that
But
applying
madam, kya hota hai
to
ki, say for example the company has 100 equity shares, right? And if against that they have also issued CCPS, which is also 100, and the conversion ratio is 1:1, which becomes like that 100 CCPS are going to get converted into another 100 equity shares. So the in totality, the company has 200. If we say diluted, the company has 200 diluted equity shares. Am I right? So the question is whether the company should consider 100 as a denominator when they are calculating the value per share, or the company or the valuers should consider 200, which is 100 equity plus 100 because of conversion, whatever number may come up to. What is the view?
It has to be
We should
200
consider-
only.
it has to be dilutive.
We should consider diluted, because in DCF we consider terminal value also.
Correct. Any other views? So yes, absolutely right. We will consider the diluted number of shares only in the case of calculation. Whatever are the numbers that will be considered based on the diluted number of shares.
Wow.
If the shares are listed, just a second. If the shares are listed, we will go in for the market price, which will be considered. And if the shares are unlisted, as we said that we'll have to do the calculation, arrive using the market multiple, DCF, NAV, and arrive at the share price, which will then act as an input figure where we are calculating the ESOP valuations. Now, the share.
Ma'am, can I ask a question?
Yes.
Ma'am, for unlisted companies, with respect to the valuation, do we need to take as on grant date, or can we take any near valuation which the company has recently, derived? So many times, startups do the, let's have taken the funding, and for that they have taken the valuation as on 31st March 2022, let's suppose. And in 1st July, they come with the ESOP plan. So for the 1st July, when they have granted, can we take the valuation, underlying valuation of equity as on 31st March?
So very, very practical question is what you have asked, because परसों ही मेरा debate चल रहा था एक company के साथ. We had only issued them the valuation report as on 31st of March, and they had now planning to issue ESOP. So they came, madam आपने ही तो issue किया था, वापस क्यों करवा रहे हो? Why can't you consider the valuation report as on the 31st of March and use it for the purpose of ESOP valuation? Yes, practically people are asking. So let me hear the views from the audience only, whether we can do it or not. What the other senior members have to say in this.
I don't think we can create any such rules. There might be certain triggering events that have happened, right? If you have reason to believe that whatever is the growth path that the company had earlier given, it is continuing in the same growth path, then perhaps one can keep some limit of maybe 3 months or maybe 6 months or something. But if let us say some certain triggering events have happened which make you believe that the old valuation is no longer valid, then you can always ask for a fresh valuation. Depends on conditions.
Absolutely true.
Thank you.
So very rightly said that it all depends upon the company. If we believe that the value has changed, we can change it. Otherwise, for safe side, what we say is that whatever was the valuation as on 31st of March is the same value that stands true as on the valuation date also. So it is not that we are using the valuation of 31st March, but we are saying that the company's valuation would have remained the same as on the date of the grant, and that is the value we are using. So I believe conceptually what is important for us to understand is that we are not using the value of 31st of March. We are using the value as on the grant date, but our assumption is that both the values are remaining the same.
Correct.
Yeah. So in case there is a change, which we believe that has happened, that maybe the company made a huge profits in this 3 months, and because of that the value has changed, or some event has happened because of which the value would have changed, then we may not be in a position to take the same number.
Yeah, any new funding round has happened, which has changed the valuation, then obviously you can use the older one. Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, that if you take the 31st of March, then the valuation date will be the 31st of March 22, no? Not the current date, no? If you are valuing the.
See, that's what I mentioned, that what is important is that people, the valuation report. Now here, when they're taking the ESOP valuation report, that is as per Companies Act, and which is saying that the report has to be as on the date of the grant. Now, when you are doing the valuation as on the date of the grant, compulsory by law, we have to take the valuation of shares also as on that date.
Okay.
So your report cannot be 31st March. It has to be as on that date. So whatever value you are taking, it has to be of that date. So the assumption becomes that the value as on that date is same as it was in 31st of March. Not that you are using 31st of March.
Better to the grant date will be also of the 31st March.
If both are same, then so there is no question only. That is the simplest option.
But practically, company it happens in the current July and onwards. They take.
Usually, we have never seen that 31st March ko he grant karte. They are very busy during those days for the other activities rather than issuing the grant letters. Can you move ahead?
Yes, please.
One more question. Can I ask?
Sure, we'll then take up the aage ka, because we have yet to delve into the Excel sheet of how.
Yes, sir. Better move forward and then ask later, no? Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Sanjay ji. Or you can put it up in the chat. We'll try to put it up later on as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So now, usually we said what is the exercise price? This is a fixed number and forms the part of the ESOP scheme. We just have to pull it out from them. And we have seen that this can be as low as even 1 rupees, or it can be higher also. It all depends. In very, very rare cases, we have seen it's a variable number wherein it is linked to share price or some performance in the future. Now, what is the expected option life? This represents the expected life of the option considering the grant date, the vesting date. And this may also require a weighted average computation for different vesting patterns within the same ESOP scheme if there are different periods on which the ESOP is going to get granted. What is the expected volatility is now here. This is an important term, and this is what is calculation is very important to understand. It is represents a measure of expected level of fluctuation in the share price, equity share price, and it is using the standard deviation method. It is calculated. If we are having doing the valuation of a listed entity, then their volatility can be directly calculated from the stock market. You can take their previous years ka share price ka report, and then based on it calculate the volatility. And in case you are doing it for an unlisted company, how we used to calculate beta using the comparable companies, same way here we will be calculating the volatility using the comparable companies. We can calculate the volatility of the unlisted entity. Now, the period for which we will calculate is the historical volatility analysis, usually performed for a similar period as the future expected option life. Say, for example, the expected option life is 3 years, then the volatility of the historical volatility of 3 years is taken into account.
I think this is where the problem is. When you're saying that large dates for startups, the number of startups that got listed is extremely rare. Given that you don't have a direct comparable companies of such kind of a growth rate, and the moment a company gets listed, they do not have a exponential growth normally. They have a traditional growth rate, and the startups, when you're looking at it, they have an exponential growth rate. So how does one determine comparability then?
This is the same problem, sir. I will ask you a counter question here. This problem is the same when we do the beta calculation of such companies. Am I right?
Not exactly true.
Huh?
Essentially, what happens is
No.
the answer.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, see, what happens is whether one has to apply a CAPM model or not is the first aspect of it to determine beta. And when you look at an unlisted entity with a traditional growth rate, you look at surrogates in the market for the beta for a similar kind of a margins and similar kind of growth rates to determine their beta part of it. However, if you are looking for two entities with a different kind of exponential growth rate, then applicability of CAPM itself is a challenge, and you look at some other methods to determine. At least that's what I think so.
No, yes, sir, you are absolutely right.
You can actually go.
I can't sell the right.
Vijaya, you can put yoga
For everybody, Anaka. You should understand everything costs money in the world now. In this world, you know, what are you trying to achieve by trying to be hasty in life? Just think about.
Sorry, a mother trying to discipline her daughter.
Oh, it's a part of us. In fact, acha lecture हमें भी मिल गया सुबह.
Yeah, even I was taking a second
Life
to
lessons
pause her.
in between valuation.
Sorry. Yes, sir.
Life lessons in between valuation.
Yeah, very important ना. वरना हम valuation करते करते थोड़े boring हो जाते हैं. So we need to learn all of this in between. Yes. So the point what sir is making is very valid, true. That how do you calculate the volatility in case of high growth companies? Frankly speaking, I don't have an answer here right now for this, because what we do is knowing that yes, the volatility of the other companies can be different than the one, but we still go ahead and calculate the volatility based on the comparables that is available. Try and find the comparable which is close to them in terms of sector, in terms of the growth patterns, and use their volatility into the working, because at the end we need to justify our working also. So we cannot completely rely upon the fact that, you know, management believes that the growth rate which was in an unlisted state will be the future state and use the same. So we are right now going ahead with the you know, comparable company route only and identifying the method. I will be happy to know if there is any other method that people are following today.
Volatility will be requiring primarily for black shows, right? Is it also required for binomial?
Yeah, binomial to usse bhi zyada, because in black shows you only consider one way. Binomial to considers both the ways. Volatility can be both the sides, and which is where whenever it comes to, you know, the companies that you are speaking of high growth rate, we try and use binomial only, because that takes into account okay, the share price can be fluctuating in any direction, and hence both are taken into account. You know?
I think unfortunately we are all force fitting a model to an equation, to a valuation. Somewhere I'm struggling. That's why I'm more than trying to figure out a solution for this. Because if someone were to really question, then we are stuck here every time, these places.
That is there. That is there. So we move forward to the risk-free rate. Now this is usually based on the government bond yield and required as on the valuation date. In the period, the tenure of the government bond considered is usually matched with the expected option life period. So here we are trying to, I think, let me explain this slide particularly when we are doing the binomial pricing. Now the binomial option pricing, we begin with the single period and then we add to it the multiple periods of binomial options pricing model. And in the multi-period, we'll be more flexible. It allows us to do both. So let me quickly explain you both the options. I will now share the Excel sheet. Practically explaining the valuation methods without the Excel sheet won't be possible here. So we use I'll first quickly explain the binomial Black-Scholes model and then go deeper. We'll use another 10 to 15 minutes to go deeper into the binomial video model, just explaining the terms and how they are taken into account. And then last 10-15 minutes, we'll touch base upon the taxation part so that the entire ESOP ka understanding is covered. At the end, as Shilpa had mentioned, that binomial in itself takes 2 hours to be explained on each of the points. It's a separate session altogether. If we want to go and do that deeper, we will definitely look up on the next front. So now this is the Black-Scholes model. This is a normal spreadsheet. Even if we do Google, the calculation wali spreadsheet is available in the market. So
it's not visible, madam.
It's not visible?
Yeah.
Still it is sharing screen, showing the message.
Okay. Oh,
Maybe you are faster than the system.
I will try to be slower then. I will reshare it.
Better if you reshare it, it comes up here.
Yes. Is it now visible? Your screen sharing is paused.
No.
Yeah,
No,
I'm
you're not.
getting a message. Your screen sharing is paused. I'm just checking why.
वहाँ पे resume करके होगा नीचे.
I'm clicking the same thing. Resume share.
Yeah.
Also, Niki, if we are planning for a follow-on session on any topic, you can touch base now and then we can take a follow-up session. Would you like to ask the...
Yeah, why don't you do that? Why don't you just put up that question if people want to do it? Till that time, I will just try to solve this, why the screen is not getting shared so that we don't waste the time.
Are we expecting another session on binomial or Black-Scholes or simulation? Follow-on session, which is more popular and which is more required, Niki?
Black-Scholes is what mostly is used, but if we learn binomial, it will cover. Then binomial agar aa gaya to Black-Scholes easy hai. Automatically it is covered in it,
So can I say binomial is fundamental thing which we all should know?
Oh, I believe binomial is something. Agar wo aa gaya to Black-Scholes aa hi jayega.
Someone is for startup के लिए Monte Carlo use करते हैं, how it is possible?
सर मोंटे कार्लो तो मेरे को भी इतना नहीं आता है, जरूरत नहीं पड़ती है, मतलब
बट अभी हम एक इवोल्यूशन में आया था तो EY ने कहा कि आई विल यूज द मोंटे कार्लो.
किसने बोला? EY ना?
EY, या
तो EY वालों के लिए तो भाई काम क्या है, उनको फीस उतनी लेनी है और अपने से अलग दिखाना है तो वो तो यूज करेंगे.
हाँ, so the client was diverted to EY.
हाँ, oh they use it. Big Fours have been using it. Practically, I have seen see, usually what I believe what assignments we get is startups, private limited companies and listed entities. ये तीनों scenarios में if it's a normal sectors, not a very very different energy sector or रिन्यूएबल एनर्जी बहुत अलग सेक्टर नहीं है, तो ब्लैक एंड शोल्स और बाइनोमियल से काम चल जाता है, इजीली यू कैन सेल थ्रू. Very rarely I have seen there is a need to use, you know, Monte Carlo.
Yeah, but they told me they will use a Monte Carlo. So I also could not understand what is the purpose.
That could be only a tactic used by Big Four to
capture the business and charge the huge fees.
To ensure that nobody else comes in. But the important thing is, does the client know why a Monte Carlo is being used? That's the whole.
The screen is visible now. Your Excel screen is visible.
There is also no use to use the Monte Carlo also.
Okay, the screen is visible now. We can discuss.
Yeah.
Shilpa, shall I go ahead? I mean, is your...
Yeah, I'll take the participants to in the end.
Done. Okay, so now very quickly on the black and Scholes. As I said, this is a standard formula sheet which is available, which we can use while we are calculating the black and Scholes model. The stock price is going to be the current price at which the shares are. Either it is available via the listed company, so you can use that one, or if it is a strike price, then we can get it input from the what do you call the calculations that we did, you know, using the NAV DCF. The strike price is what we get it from the ESOP scheme. I'm sorry, मुझे लग रहा है मुझे अब नींद आने लगी है. So the ESOP, the strike price is that number which we take it. Volatility is the calculation which we do based on the period, you know. As I said, okay, there is a methodology here arrived wherein you calculate the share price of different periods. Maybe you get the share price of different periods, calculate the lean normal, log normal formula apply karke we calculate the returns. From that we arrive at the daily or the value annual volatility, and then based upon the whatever is the time period for which we are going to be using, you know, the option ka value, according to that aap use karte hai uska volatility ka number. Then comes the risk free rate.
Excuse me, Niki ma'am.
Yeah.
What about the volatility for an unlisted company?
As I said, that if it's an unlisted company, we go back to its peers, comparable companies, which are listed, and we calculate their volatility, and then come back to us saying that it comes to
Okay.
Ma'am,
Thank you.
Ma'am, can we use can we use Sensex or are there any indices for volatility?
See, when you are using Sensex and indices, okay, let's understand what is the concept and meaning of volatility. By concept and meaning of volatility, we mean the share price of this particular entity is going to be growing or is going to be moving in this percentage over the time period. So if you use the Sensex and the indices, what interpretation you are trying to make is that my company is going to grow as the indices and Sensex have grown. So what is preferred is you should not use Sensex and indices, but use a comparable company, because sector ke jo implications hai, that gets covered when you use the other companies from your comparable sector rather than going for the indices stuff.
True, ma'am. But as you know, in today's environment, startups are very creative, and there is no listed comparables around them, like in AI sector or holographic something. So they are very creative and innovative. So how can we deal in that case?
Pritam, in that case, so you only negated that what you are doing may not or should not be done, because if the company is so creative and new, then how can we assume that the way Sensex is moving, you know, same way में ये company move होगी, because Sensex की movement की तो वजह बहुत अलग है और वो तो बहुत matured companies के growth के ऊपर depend करके हो रही है, whereas your company that when you are talking about is again going to be having a very different growth rates and the growth cycle. In such a scenario, though, I believe it's going to be more difficult if you're using it. But at the end, you know, the point is that there is no right and wrong if you are able to give justification to the input that you're using it, because ultimately everything is going to be a part of your reports.
Okay, ma'am. Okay.
Any idea internationally what they do for measuring volatility? Because they also have the same thing. There's a lot of startups, newest stuff may not be comparable. Any idea?
I believe what is happening is, even in case when we are doing our beta calculations and we want to somehow, I see both the situations to be very similar. we go back to international companies and check out their growth rates, as to how they have been moving. Because if my sector is the same, my industry is the same, there is a very good potential and a possibility that it will behave in a similar manner, subject to a few corrections or adjustments which are required because of the country risk and similar other stuff. The same volatility can be considered. So I believe if we go internationally here also to calculate on the volatility front, I think with a few adjustments, it should be a viable option to do it.
I think let's move forward. Let's move forward. I think.
Yes. Then we go forward on the term period, which is the tenure for which the calculation is done, and the dividend yield is again the dividend which is the yield for the futuristic period. Now here, so that was the calculation of Black-Scholes. These are the input figures. Once you put in the input figure, automatically you're gonna get the value. When we go to the binomial method, when we go to the binomial method, these are the assumption is that this is a grant date and other different exercise dates based on which we have calculated the different period. Also, the volatility will be calculated for each period, and come back to the calculation of binomial, wherein each nodes are getting added, and with a different time period, each of the stock prices, whether it will go upward or downward, is considered, and whether based on that, what will be the option ka value, whether it will be an in the money option or out of money, is taken into account, and based on that calculation, the option value is ultimately arrived at. What happens is in binomial model, if the company is very cyclical, as sir was mentioning, binomial gives us the liberty to add different growth periods for different time horizons, and a different volatility can be taken into account, such that if we want to bring in more chances of growth into the company, it can be considered, and the most nearest figure to the actual valuation can be brought in by adding in the different time periods and the larger time periods. If you will see this sheet, okay, we've gone up to 100 nodes ka calculation to get into more accurate number and take into account different different volatility period of that company into account, such that the risk of variation goes down. Okay, here I don't think we'll be able to take this, or maybe we can take this when we go deeper. We've tried to explain each and every line item in the calculation and how do we arrive at in this, but I believe this is part we can take it up when we are going deeper on the understanding of each of the topic. But as we continue on the sharing, let's understand how it will have the correlation between the variables and the fair value of the option. That if the implied volatility of the stock is increasing, then in that case, there will be a change in the option value, and that will also go up. If the risk-free rate of interest goes up, obviously the option value goes up. If the dividend value increases, the option value will go down. If the expected option life increases, there is a higher duration, obviously the option value will go up. Market price increases, the value goes up. Exercise price of the option increases, then the value goes down. In fact, what we have seen is in one of the cases, the share price was worth 1,072, and the strike price at which the employees were issued, that was 1 rupee. In which case, what we found that the option value was arriving at somewhere very close to 1,000 rupees. And the logic is pretty simple, that the employee is getting almost the shares for free, and which is why the option value is very high, and which is why again the company will be taking a debit to the P&L to a larger extent. So there is a correlation between the strike price and the option value that will be coming up.
So the last column is the value of call options, right? Not put options. Right?
Sorry?
Change in option value. The option is a call option.
Call option, right? Yes,
call
yes,
option.
yes.
At
ESOPs
times,
are call option.
put option will go exactly the opposite.
Sir, absolutely true. We are talking here only about the call options because When we do the ESOP valuation, it is the call options only.
Yeah, correct.
Yep. Okay. Now what I will do is the last 10 to 15 minutes, we can touch base upon the two parts. One is the tax implications that come up when we do the ESOPs granting scheme is done. And on the last topic, we'll take up the difference between the ESOP and the sweat equity shares and the few other non-share based payments. I would request Abhishek, who is a part of our team and a contributor to helping me prepare this presentation. And he is the one from our tax team. So Abhishek, can you just quickly run us through the tax implication and tax options?
Yes. And please pardon me that this is my first time. So if there are any mistakes, so please pardon me for that. Can I share my screen if it's possible?
Sure, I'll just stop. Do you have an option
Thank you,
to
ma'am.
share screen?
Yes, yes.
Please do.
Okay, thank you.
A one-line introduction about you also, Mr. Abhishek, will appreciate.
Okay, let me take this opportunity to give his introduction. So Abhishek Shah is a chartered accountant, and he's been a tax professional working with our tax team since last 3 years now, and great insights into the taxation part is what he has. He deals into all the taxations, but ESOP taxation has been his favorite too. So that's how he's going. And I'm a little zero on the tax front, which is where I asked Abhishek that if you can just help us out, then we can cover up the entire, the ESOP understanding. Cool, Abhishek, your screen is visible. You can go ahead.
Okay, okay. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. So on the part of the ESOP taxation part, so there are two aspects. The employer point of view.
Abhishek, looks like
So
your
let me-
network connectivity is unstable. You can switch off your video and continue.
Correct, Abhishek. Just switch off your video and continue. Your voice is cracking.
Okay, okay. Thank you. Am I audible now?
Better, you can give it a shot.
Okay. So from the employer point of view, so it is a main question, is a important question whether this expense which are they are making as a provision is that allowable during this period of time when they make provisions. So actually, employer will make provisions during the vesting period of this ESOPs. So let's take an take an example like a vesting period is of 3 years. So this
Abhishek, can you Abhishek, 1 minute? Can you come near to your router or anything, because it's actually not comprehensible what you're on and off. Your voice is not audible. We are not able to comprehend the points which you are making.
Okay, Abhishek, I would request,
Ah.
I believe people will not be able to hear you. So let me do one thing. I will ask Darshak to take it up, because otherwise we'll waste time and your voice is actually not audible at all. So let me ask Darshak to take up the tax part and he can explain it up. So Shilpa, Darshak is my partner and tax, he's my life partner also and tax partner also. So he is heading the tax department, and so I believe, let me take this advantage of having husband at home early in the morning. So maybe he can then take it up the entire tax front. Come. We are on the tax front. So we are on the tax front. We just began. Abhishek, can you just stop the screen? I'll share it.
Okay, okay.
Voice crack हो रहा है, बहुत crack हो रहा है, कुछ सुनाई नहीं दे रहा है. You can say it was last minute.
So this is one disadvantage of having husband at home. Anytime she will wake up and say that, okay, now you have to take the lecture.
This is a
Delegation in action.
Okay. So guys, I'm sorry, but I'm not aware of the whole crowd, but since I was just having my sleep. But yeah, ESOP, whether the allowability of ESOP expenses on the part of employer. So here what happened is largely the question was,
Can you be Mr. Can you be a little louder, please?
Oh, I'll be sorry. So thanks Silpa for informing this. Basically, in case of ESOPs, what happens is we start making provision of ESOP expenses on a regular basis, right? So right from the date of the grant till the date of exercise, the provisions are made. Now the question was that whether this will be allowed as an expenditure or not on a provisional basis. Now then the matter went to Supreme Court, and the arguments which were placed before them were that whether this is going to be considered as a contingent liability or whether it is going to be considered as an liability. So the Supreme Court very interestingly made a very important outcome. The outcome was that it is a liability. It's an ascertained liability because the grants are already made. So since the grants are already made, it is an ascertained liability, and it is not a contingent liability. It is only that it is not unascertainable. The amount you can't ascertain, but the liability is certain. And therefore, Supreme Court said that from the date of allowance of the expenditure, the date of allowance of the expenditure would be from the grant date, and you need not have to necessarily wait for exercise date for getting the ESOP expenditure. So that's about allowance of expenditure. Now this I'm
Can I ask a question?
I'm sorry.
Can I ask a question? I would like to ask a question.
Yeah, please. Don't
Yeah,
ask me a difficult question. That's the only point.
No, we'll try actually as a group.
No,
So the question is, what if the ESOPs are granted, and if someone leaves in the middle, then that person will not get the ESOPs. So if the expenditure is already booked, so would that be reversed or how is it treated?
It will be reversed, or let's say if the provisions. So there are two things. One is there are schemes, right? ESOP schemes. So there is not necessarily only one scheme. There can be multiple ESOP schemes which are running together. So for example, a bunch of employees, there is one ESOP scheme. Then there are new bunch of employees who have gathered, and for them there is another scheme, and so, right? Now let's say the one ESOP scheme has got triggered, and where you realize that out of 15 employees whom you were supposed to give, only 12 employees turned up for exercising it. So moving to your question, 3 employees didn't turn up, and therefore that amount of provision which was made is an excess provision, an excess expenditure claim. So you will reverse that expenditure and adjust it against the other provisions which you're going to make it for the second scheme. So that's how the adjustments might happen. Let's say if there is no second scheme, then there will be a reversal.
Yeah, got it. Actually, even I realized that if the company is large and there are movement of people, the total provision will take care of in terms of setting off those expenses in terms of somebody is leaving or somebody is joining. So I think yeah, that will be taken care in overall provisions. Thank you.
Okay. The next slide is about treatment for employees. So in employees, how will it happen is basically the date when it is basically allotted. Okay, whatever is going to be the exercise price and whatever is the fair market value of that particular shares. So fair market value minus exercise price is going to be the tax perquisite in the hands of employees. Now that particular fair market value, which is already determined, now that becomes the cost. And when the employee is going to sell the shares, okay, sale value minus fair market value on which the tax is already paid will be allowed as in cost. So the differential amount will be available for, the differential amount will be capital gain. So that's the tax treatment which is going to be there for employees. Now,
that means 1 minute, sir. That means already TDS will become applicable soon after for the year in which it is allotted, right? TDS also.
Yes. So TDS is TDS is applicable in the year in which you are exercising the option.
Thanks. Because it's already a perquisite in the hands of employees.
Yes.
Sir, I have a question. With respect to exercising, as ma'am have mentioned earlier, that we need to take the valuation report from the merchant banker when the employee exercise its rights. So if there are multiple exercise dates, do we need to take the valuation on each date, or how is it?
So I think that depends upon how so if there is a significant difference in valuation. So there are events like, so if the organization is having different events and in the span of 2 exercise date, let's say there are some significant events happened because of which your valuation is going to be changed, then of course you will require a different valuation.
If no events are there, then 6 months is the validity period, I think somewhere
Yes.
I have heard.
Yes.
Okay. Is it mandatory to do it from DCF, or can we do on NAV basis also?
Is it NAV, right?
Any
Huh?
merchant banker to decide.
So merchant banker will take that particular call. But I think just a second, I'm just having Niki along. The valuation will be on what, NAV basis or DCF basis?
That's what the question is. People are saying it should be NAV. I don't think it's mentioned anywhere. It is up to the merchant banker to decide what method he wants to use.
No, actually, it is the merchant banker who has to choose the approach as well as the method. So the law does not prescribe whether it has to be NAV, nor does it say that it is DCF. So, I mean, as we do any other valuation, if there is justification for using NAV or DCF, then it certainly will be acceptable.
No,
so as far as income tax is concerned, income tax is absolutely relying on the merchant banker. There is no specific method prescribed for ESOP exercise. They have absolutely relied on
Rule 11 UA for the same.
Sorry.
So
no, you cannot.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
A small startup having issuing ESOP for 5-6 employees also, this is applicable, no, Mr. Uttam?
Yes.
Yes, for everyone. Actually. Yeah.
What was the last question which was there, I believe, from Uttam?
Whether we can use 11 UA methodology for doing the valuation under section 17 for the perquisites.
So there are 2 methods, right? 11 UA also has 2 methods. One is for DCF and one is for transfer of shares, and one is for issue of shares.
Correct, sir.
Right. So as far as section 17 is concerned, they have left it open for the merchant banker to decide. Now, since I had a valuer in-house, I was just checking which method she is using. Okay. Moving forward, I think then the next point is about perquisite. So what happens is, there was a lot of cry which was going out in the startup world, because what was happening for them, the shares which they were exercising, they were not able to liquidate, and since they were not able to liquidate, they had to pay tax on that. Okay. So therefore, there was a lot of cry going out around them, and therefore this new provision had come up where they had deferred the taxability. So how the deferment is happening is, they have given relief in the form of 5 years from the date of the grant. So you can pay off the taxes in the 5th year. The second relief which is given is that if you leave the employment, that is the second one. So either the 5 years condition, or when you leave the employment, or when you sell the shares. Okay. So that you get the funds, and then out of that you can pay the tax. So with that objective, this relief was given for the startups, and those are the eligible startups. So those registered startups, and if those are giving ESOPs, and employees of their ESOP, their companies will have to defer the tax. So they can always take that benefit of deferring the tax liability. Now, how that working happens is something which is reflected over here. So if you see here, let's say the salary income is 90 lakhs. Sorry, the salary income is 40 lakhs. The perquisite value is 90 lakhs. So total 1 crore 30 is basically the value. Out of that, tax amount is 37 lakhs, right? Surcharge including everything is 44 lakhs. So ideally, if he is a non-startup, non-eligible startup, then he would have to pay tax of 44 lakhs. But just because there is a deferment benefit available, so he will pay today the tax only on salary. But for the purpose of rate calculation, the average tax will be worked out, which is going to be coming to 13 lakhs, which is basically 44 lakh into 40 lakhs divided by 1 crore 30 lakhs. So that's how it is arriving to 13 lakhs. Now the balance tax, which is 30 lakhs, that is going to be paid later, as I said, in the 5th year, or when he leaves the employment, or third when he liquidates the shares, whichever is earlier, there he will have to pay balance 30 lakhs tax. So that's the computation which is provided as a relief for the eligible startup employees.
I have a question here with respect to eligible startup. Is it only the DIPP recognition or the ATIAC approval also, the second level tax approval? What is considered, at which stage is it considered as eligible startup? First level or second level?
So DIPP approval is what is required.
Okay.
No, I think it is ATIAC benefit, because I was also under the impression it was only DIPP. But it calls out as you have to go to that interministerial board and get their blessing as well.
So DIPP approval is basically mainly to get the startups eligible.
No, that's what, because it calls it out as eligible startup, and eligible startup is specifically defined under the Act as one who has got an interministerial board approval. So you need to classify yourself as that second stage approval in order
But
to
that
get
ministry,
this
is it not department, itself?
No. There are two things. One is
IT.
ATIAC.
I know.
And the other one is simple DIPP, where anybody who is there goes and gets a approval.
Okay.
Purposefully,
it's made complicated so that they can catch.
That's what most of the
employee.
startups think, that they have this benefit, but unfortunately, my opinion was that they don't have this benefit unless they go to that ATIAC. So I'm yet to come across somebody who has that eligible startup benefit. Very few are actually given that.
Actually, very less number of startups are having this particular benefit. If I am not wrong, somewhere I have read that there are only 44 or 45 startups which have given this particular eligibility.
Yeah, the number is very low. Out of the
Yeah, the number is
startups, the eligible ones are only around just below 100.
Yeah. So that's what somewhere I had heard about.
So then that means to say then initial recognition or the simple recognition from DIPP will not entitle for any of the tax relaxations or exemptions.
No, you have to be an eligible. They have defined what is eligible startup. There are certain conditions which you have to present. You have to be eligible for. Several conditions are there. Then you have to apply for it, and the ministry gives you recognition for that.
Oh, so the concurrent simple DIPP approval is not good enough to take this benefit.
No.
There's more to be done. Okay.
No.
Okay.
Thanks, Kaushik, for raising this question.
Yeah, thank you, Kaushik. Moving forward. Sorry. So now this is basically related to ESOPs versus sweat equity. So these are characteristics. So which are the different options, different instruments which are available for startups? Sorry, for the ESOPs issuance. So I'll just very quickly run through it. So for example, here basically ESOPs versus sweat equity is options available. Now, what is that difference between the two is something which I have explained in this particular slides. Then this is basically a differentiation between each one of it. So basically ESOPs, sweat equity, phantom shares, SAR, all this, what are the different different features of each one of it is been explained over here. I think this requires a detailed discussion on this. But I think as far as the tax is concerned, some of the points which are relevant for ESOP is something which I have just highlighted over here. Shall I complete it? Okay, so I think that's what is about taxation. If there are any questions in relation to tax, we can discuss that.
I have one question on the taxation front. In the slide for deductibility of expenses for the Biocon case, you have given that it is allowable on straight line basis. But most of the cases that we do it based on graded vesting, where majority of the expense actually gets taken care in the first year. So we see typically 50% of the total ESOP expense gets loaded onto the year 1, and it comes down subsequently for year 2 and year 3 when we go as per the guidance note or Ind AS. So, but there it was mentioned as straight line basis. So I was just wondering, do we have to restate the expenditure on straight line basis for the purpose of income tax, or are we good to go based on whatever is the guidance note allowance?
I think we are good to go as far as whatever guidelines note is allowing, because here what happened is the matter was mainly in reference to whether it is going to be allowed in the year when the exercise are actually happening. Okay, and therefore the argument was in respect of contingent liabilities versus ascertained liabilities. So the importance which was given over there was mainly on whether it is considered as a contingent liability or whether it is considered as a ascertained liability, where the court was very clearly saying that it is basically a liability which is certain, but the amount is unascertained, and therefore whatever provisions have been made in the books based on the guidelines is something which we have to follow.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Considering the time, we may be able to take only one question.
Sir, shares issues to advisors or mentors would be part of sweat equity.
Shares issued to mentors,
like mentors or advisors who are not employees or as a directors, or to someone who is an outside consultant. In startups, fees as well as some equity is also been given to them. So in that case, would it be the part of sweat equity, and what would be the taxation implication on the same when the shares are issued? And the consultant has not sold, but the shares are issued. So what would be the tax liability for the same?
So basically, it is going to be like, for example, if you have issued the shares to them, so it is going to be acting. Just give me a second. So here, what happens is when the sweat equities are given, the eligibility is only on the all permanent employees and directors, whether in India or outside India, of subsidiary and holding, which is into the business for more than 1 year. So they, as per the company's laws, sweat equities can be given to employees and directors of the company who are into the business for more than 1 year. So therefore, when you are giving them consultants, when they are getting the shares, that is going to be a preferential allotment.
Okay. Thank you.
Right. And the treatment will, of course, will be like similar to what you are getting it as a form of a preferential allotment from a company. So
yeah, they're actually calling it advisory equity.
For it, right, it is advisory equity.
So what will be the tax implication? Let's say, because if the fair value is, let's suppose 500 rupees, but to advisors, they are normally given at 10 rupees, like just like ESOP, 10 rupees or at face value.
There are two parts to it. One is for
Sir, your voice is breaking. Sorry, sir, your voice
allotment
is breaking.
which you have service, which you have, no problem. Just give me a second. I think now it should be better.
Yes, sir.
Am I audible now to you?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, better.
Okay. So what happens is basically that if the service is already rendered, okay, in that particular case, of course, you have already booked the revenue and you have shown it as receivable, and you will be adjusting against those equities. Now the question largely is going to arise when the services are not completely rendered. Okay. Now that there is a there is a very important analysis which is lying there, because what happens is, for example, if you have taken a mandate for a startup companies to take them to a tech 10x, let's say, okay, and you have started rendering the services for them, and you have still not completed all the years of services, but you have got the allotment at the initial stage. Largely, commercially, it is not happening, but just to take as an argument's sake, otherwise, generally what happens, the phantom shares have been allotted in such kind of a situation. But let's say, for an example, if you have got the allotment of those shares, okay, and you have received those shares in a preferential allotment, then that becomes your perquisites under section 28.
So can it also be considered as the shares that are being issued in lieu of cash?
Yeah, that's what section 20.
Valuation, and there will be a GST implication. So therefore, whatever is the, if that person has already discharged GST on that portion, then it is like acquiring an asset, and then that will be the cost of acquisition for him, for the mentor.
Let's break this point. First is, let's say where the services are already rendered. Okay, so when the services are already rendered, you have already booked as a receivable, and against that you will be adjusting this, right?
Correct.
But for the company, this will be payable, right? Not the receivable. So you're talking from the mentor perspective or the company?
From the mentor perspective.
Okay, but we'll be looking from the company perspective for allotment or the.
Okay, so then let's look from the company perspective. Let's say from the company perspective, when the shares are allotted, okay, and if the services are already received, then you have already booked as a payable.
Usually that doesn't happen, though that is how in the notional basis it is payable, but in the books we don't record that. Again, TDS implication, all of that, the income for the person who is receiving it, this is all hypothetical. It is off the records and nowhere in the accounting records coming in.
So first of all, the service which are already rendered, you will record it, right? I'm talking with an example where the services are already rendered, against that you are getting allotment.
Correct. It is all there.
Sir, here I don't think what is relevant is whether the services are rendered or not. What is relevant here is whether the allotment is made or not. If the allotment is made, then the company has no option but to record the liability, record the expenditure. And when it records the expenditure, the implication of TDS will definitely follow.
So it is
even if the services are not rendered.
Okay, then let's go into that as a second example, because let's first focus on the first example. First example is going to be where the services is rendered. So are we on the same page that when the service is rendered, you will book the liability, and against the allotment you will adjust it? That's the first treatment. Are we on the same page as far as this first part is concerned? Let's not get on to whether the service is rendered or not. That will come up later.
Sir, here the question is, would it be considered as, in this case where the services have already been rendered, the expenditure has already been booked, the liability has already been recognized, allotment is what is happening now, in which case will it be considered as an allotment of shares for consideration other than cash from a Companies Act perspective?
No.
Let me give an example that if say we got a mandate of raising funds, and in lieu of our consideration, the company is giving us shares of some percentage. So in that case, what will be the tax implication? And what will be the value of services which the value on which the tax is to be paid in income tax as well as for GST purpose?
Right. So first of all, let's understand this, that for example, the service is rendered, right? In the example which you just spoke about,
yes, services is rendered.
The service is rendered. So you have already determined the value of that particular service.
It is in lieu of equity shares.
So then the fair market value of the shares which are getting allotted, that becomes the value of service, because commercially nobody is going to pay more than what your value of service is. Do you agree to that?
Yes, but in okay.
Okay. So therefore, you will book the liability accordingly, and it will not be considered against non-consideration, because the consideration is in lieu of the service which you have provided. And therefore, the tax treatment also will be as if this is against the revenue services which has been provided, where you are getting it in form of shares.
Okay.
Sir, and sorry, in case the previous participant is already done with his question, then I have a small question around this particular aspect. Now, for passing an accounting entry at year end, when the vesting has not been done, but kind of allotment is already there. Now, do we have to be taking the valuation from a registered valuer or a normal CA or what?
Are you in connection with the same question or something different?
No, it is regarding valuation only, sir. On that ESOP valuation, when at year end we have got to be making an entry in our books of account, that is in the company's books of account, do we need to take a valuer's valuation certificate, or a chartered certificate will do, or how do we go about it?
Registered valuer certificate is required.
Thank you.
Sir, just to add point, since this is recognizing this a fair valuation, this is not in a certificate. Registered value report is recommended. However, even management has got a required experience. Even they can also certify, but that auditor may not accept as an independent valuation.
Absolutely.
So my conclusion is management can give, provided they got expertise. But the registered value certificate is auditor insistent.
Generally, practically, always registered valuer will only come into picture.
Yes, sir.
Can we conclude the session? It's 9:40.
I just have one question from Ms. Niki. Can I get it clear? I've seen in also chat box also I put.
Yeah, please, Sanjay ji, I'm here only.
Just I need to concern when my private limited company wants to issue further ESOP. Okay, so we should do first the equity version is on 31st of March 22. And on the suppose it comes to 220 na, on 30% discount they will issue the exercise price that will be determined. Then that is okay, conclude or further issue ESOP do version. I think.
Okay, so your question is correct. You said two input things. One, you said that the equity value that you will consider is based on whatever you had come across as the time of issue of shares, further issue.
Yeah.
That is one value that you will use at FMV. Second is 30% discount, that will be your strike price, which you will consider in your valuation. But you will have to do the ESOP valuation, because that is what will be used when you will consider the debit to the P&L. Books of accounts mein jab debit to P&L karna hai, that is where you will need the ESOP valuation, which will be separate from these two numbers. These two numbers become
which will come next year to you.
These two numbers.
अभी तो valuation कर दे. अभी तो just companies को grant letter issue कर देगा, that is sufficient ना. Suppose whatever the price conclude, nothing to do more na as a value part.
ESOP valuation as on the grant date na.
Yeah. So that is the for ESOP I don't need immediately na ESOP valuation.
So you will need at the time of grant, you will need ESOP valuation from RV.
So suppose it comes to value option, that is the value of the option na.
Yes, that is the value of the option, and this value of the option the auditors will use to debit in the P&L for the option value accounting purposes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah. Now that we are 9:45, I would like to conclude the session. I request Mr. Subbaraidu to before that. Sorry, I would like to know whether can the participants raise their virtual hand who are interested to have a follow-on session with respect to binomial model, no, Niki? Yeah, binomial model.
Yes. It's a very good hand. Where is the hand option?
Yeah, whoever has raised virtual hand, I can understand you're interested to have a follow-on session for, from
I'm
the
also interested, but I'm not finding where to raise the hand.
I am also interested, ma'am.
Option to raise the hand is not visible.
Yeah, that is not visible.
Muted hand.
We
Yeah,
can
yeah, I
we
got
can
it.
do
Let's
on
have
maybe
a-
Sunday. Ma'am, can we do on Sunday also?
No, follow-up session will be planned little later, like say after 1 month, or as and when we have a
I would recommend a follow-up option be done physically, because there is not something virtual. We are in any case planning for some physical session, right? I think
Niki is based out of Mumbai, if I'm not sure.
she can be present virtually, maybe. But yeah, we'll see. Because
I'll be traveling to I'll be traveling to Bangalore in the first week of August.
excellent.
So
Yeah.
during that period, if you want to do one physical session, we can plan out.
Yeah.
Yeah, Niki, I'll
तो
get back to you.
जब तक एक्सेल शीट खोल के नहीं बैठेंगे खुद नहीं करेंगे तब तक वो पूरी तरीके से समझ में नहीं आएगा, फिर भूल जाओगे.
बाइनोमियल तो उसके अलावा बाउंसर है पूरा.
Right.
Yeah.
तो फिर one day करें. Ma'am, I am from Varanasi actually. I long distance, so I plan in such a way that I can do for the whole day. For 2 hours to travel, it's a very
No, actually, we can think of a hybrid
hectic,
model
na?
where people can participate virtually.
हाँ, hybrid कर सकते हैं. Yeah. Whosoever can come physically, and other people can participate virtually also that way. Yeah.
Yeah, we plan one follow-on session with Niki as and when she is Bangalore. Now I request Mr. Subaraidu to convey vote of thanks on behalf of Bangalore Valuers Association and ACVA to our speaker, Niki.
Speakers, we had 2 of them. Okay. So, okay. So we'll call them Niki Shah and Mr. Niki Shah for better. Sorry. So yeah, see, this topic of ESOP valuation is an evergreen topic, and you can attend multiple sessions, and every session, every speaker with their background tend to bring in new dimensions of ESOP valuation, which are always there. So for that reason, I think that is the reason we had a very widespread and very active participation here, indicating that there are lots of action on this front for most of us valuers, and also a lot of open questions and a lot of issues. And thank you, Niki ma'am, and your husband too, for coming in and covering all the aspects of valuation, including the taxation aspects of ESOP as well. Looking forward to going deeper into binomial valuation spreadsheets, and also, if possible, Monte Carlo simulation also, because the main important issue seems to be that which method to use under which conditions, which seems to be an important aspect of conducting the valuation also, in addition to how to and what values to use, benchmarking comparable companies at different stages and all. This will be a very good and very interactive session that we had, and I think all of us learned as much from the question answer session as much from the initial presentation also. Thank you very much, BVA, for selecting the right speakers, and thank you for all the audience also for the active participation as well. Thank you very much.
Niki, request from all the participants is please share your PPT. I don't know whether I have to ask Excel or not. I don't know. Excel sharing will be a spoon feeding, but then PPT, yes, definitely our request is to share PPT.
You also want Mr. Niki Shah also to be present at the physical session, so that we can do a lot of deliberation about the tax aspects as well.
Tax, I am zero. I'll need Darshak. Otherwise, I will be completely zero in tax.
Yeah, so we are inviting Mr. Darshak also for the physical session, so that we can actually do a brainstorming session and make sure that we try and analyze from start to finish. Although
actually,
we don't
correct. ESOP discussion is incomplete if you leave the tax aspect out of it, both for company as well as the recipients as well.
Yeah, so it will be a great session. It will really be, of course, if Mr. Darshak can be available virtually also, that will be, it will be great.
Sure. Thank you so much. We'll definitely look into it.
Madam, and an additional request, in case feasible, please share Excel as well. In case feasible.
Yeah, sure. What I would suggest is, I will definitely share the Excel too.
Thank you.
I would
Thank you.
suggest, unless the Excel is explained, it is like a story in a different language. What we can do is, once we plan the follow-up session and we actually run through in depth of the Excel, I will definitely share the Excel too.
Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. Excel तो ऐसी चीज है कि जो बनाने वाला ही समझता है कि उसमें क्या है. If the person who made the Excel is not there to explain, half the understanding goes away like that.
Yes.
Sir, I have one point. Since many of the people are asking, maybe you can look at for having a half-a-day session with the practical insights, like a workshop, if it is
Yes.
physically. You can think of, sir.
Correct.
Actually, half a day can be planned. Let's think through across, because ESOP is something which currently I believe a lot of companies are coming up with the options of issuing ESOPs. So we as value, if we are able to get overall insights on how ESOP, when and how do we use it. In fact, we couldn't touch base upon the different non-share based payment methods that are also being applicable. We can try and cover it next time.
Yeah. So friends, it's time to say bye to everyone. Thanks all for participating in the session. I request everyone to participate in that feedback form so that it will help us, to communicate to the speaker any feedback which you would like to share. And also for next sessions, what is the probable, a topic or a speaker you can suggest, please.
And I would like to thank everybody. You all were such a wonderful audience. You made sure that I did not sleep early in the morning. So thank you so much for being such a wonderful audience.
You are such a magical couple. It was, interesting to see you together.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think until you complete giving the feedback, you cannot close it. Okay.